Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back here to Super Sunday here on Apex Racing TV and part 2 of the Weekend Warriors, that being the Spec Racer Fords. My name is Ron Mons. Alongside me in the commentary booth is Charles Michelle, and in the virtual production hall are our old friend Samuli Kumo. Now we welcome you all to Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, a much less foggy Canadian Tire Motorsports Park that we saw a couple weeks ago for the Formula Fords. However, it's still the same track with the same challenges we saw in those very different cars a couple of weeks ago. Now, Charles, this track, I think we can draw a lot of similarities between this track of Canadian Tire Motorsports Park and the one we saw last time out at the VIR North layout. It's a very similar track in the way that there's a lot of twists and turns for these drivers to negotiate with only one real long flat out blast. So to pass this off to you, do you think the racing we're going to have here at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park will be a little bit similar to what we saw last time out at VIR?
Yeah, I definitely think there's some similarities between this and the North course at VIR. We don't normally run the North course, so I think this one's probably a little better, more utilized. Lots of the iRacing official sessions, official league come and run here in various cars. So, even if these guys that drive more than just a spec racer come out, they could be running anything from the Formula Skippies or the Formula Fords all the way up to the new GTP, prototype cars on this track. So it's, like I said, it's pretty widely used. And so I think that there's definitely some similarities, but I think this one's a little better known than the other.
One thing as well, we brought this up a lot on the Formula Ford broadcast last week, and we'll bring it up again here with the Spec Racer Fords. This is a very old scan of Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. Really, the whole facility, ever since iRacing last scanned this track, has been upheld in some sort of way, shape, or form. We're actually getting a good view there of turn number 2, Clayton Corner, and that corner has a lot more, well, on this version, it's pretty much entirely grass runoff until you hit those tire barriers on the outside, which are pretty much made out of the matter of white dwarf stars here. In real life, it's a lot smoother. You have some asphalt runoff to deal with, and the whole track as well, even going down to the pit entry, has been changed ever since iRacing last did a scan here. I think it may be one of the oldest scans that is still being used in iRacing today, so fingers crossed iRacing gets around to rescanning this wonderful facility, one of the most historic tracks in Canada. Hopefully they can rescan it in the not too distant future. It's a very fun track, this though, and very challenging as well. We will see attrition play a role here in this race we have coming up, and we brought it up a lot in the Formula Ford broadcast last time out here at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park 1 week ago, and I think I'll bring it up with you again this week, Charles. A lot of challenging corners we're seeing the drivers go through one right now, that being Moss Corner. Do you think that is the most important corner here on this track, or do you have another nominee?
No, I think that's the most challenging of the corners on here. Just shortly, followed by turn 2, as you said. That turn 2, turn 1's kind of tight, but it's not really too difficult to deal with. But turn 2 is such a precise corner as far as your entry, just your entry angle and your entry speed. You don't take enough, you end up really tight, and it kind of unsettles the car. You take too much speed and you're out in the grass. Moss Corner is just one of those that there's one line in and one line out, and you need to hit it, and any deviation from that is either a spin to the inside in the grass, or you're out in the gravel and trying to collect the car before it gets into the barriers. So the changes to the iRacing's physics modeling for friction in the off-track surfaces they did a few seasons ago, we've talked about it a lot here, really helped the racing out at this track in particular, because of that turn 2 and turn 5 complex there, that you can make a mistake and recover the car. It's not a death sentence, more or less, if you get it wrong and get off the track. It's basically one-way trip to the wall, and then a nice tow back to the pits. Day done. Here now you can, if you work the throttle and the brakes properly, you can get the car checked up and get it back on the track without ever touching the wall, and you can continue your race.
This track is a challenge with a lot of medium-speed corners, mid-speed corners, which may make it quite fitting here being the 6th round of the season, midway through the Spec Racer 4 Weekend Warriors season so far. And I think now that we're midway through the season and in the the final 5 minutes here of this qualifying session, I think we may take a look at the championship points, because now that we're midway through, we have a pretty good idea who's going to be at the front. It's Joao Tabino at the front of S2, 434 points on the board right now, and a pretty decent gap between himself and Jason Green there in P number 2, Evandro Dantas, the Brazilian, there in P number 3, and Dudu Castro there in P number 4. So fairly close at the front of the S1 category, a little bit spread out compared to some of the other classes that we have, but still, that's going to be a nice fight between all of those drivers. Atlas Pleva there, P10 in the S1 standings. They're actually won last time at VIR, so we'll see what he can do there in this in the rest of the season, for that matter. I think we'll move on to S2 now, which I believe is much closer there. You can see Philip Berry at the front of the standings in the 888 car there. He's leading Paul Jackson, but not by a whole lot. It's only, what, 4 points separating those two, even though we're 5 rounds into the season, approaching the 6th round tonight. So that is very close at the front of S2. Then they have a pretty decent gap between themselves and Russell Teckler there in P number 3 in class. That's Pedro Carvalho there in P4, and Brazo Roscoe there in P number 5, rounding out the top 5 there in the S2 category. And I think we'll move it on to Masters here, which is always incredibly tense, and you can see it right there. The two Australians, Tom Gradwell there at the front, 270 points on the board. Brad Cathcart there in second, 269 points there on the board. I'm waiting for anyone to type in nice in the YouTube chat, but still, that is a nice gap, and I think that's going to be a nice battle. 1 point separating the top 2 drivers in the Masters category. 5 races into the season with 7 more to go. Charles, I think you've said this a lot throughout the season, that the Masters category is the one to keep your eyes out for. Has that changed, or are you still keeping your eye out for Masters, or is there another class that you want to keep your eyes on?
It's still Masters, because the 2 guys that we would normally see up there battling for the Masters is Jorg Monty and Antonio Race. And we talked about Jorg and his string of bad luck he's had this season, both in this series and with the Formula Fords. Just can't seem to catch a break his direction. So those guys that you would normally see up at the top are not there. So it's pretty wide open, and the guys that are being consistent are taking advantage of it, and those are the guys you're seeing up front.
And as it stands at the moment here in this qualifying session, about 17 minutes and 45 seconds on the clock in this 20-minute session. It's Marco Pinera at the front at a 129.1, basically no time. Separating the top 3 right now, it's Castro there, 0.046 of a second back of Marco Pinera right now. Just a small little bit of a draft around this track can make up that difference, and you can see he closes up quite a lot there. Dudu Castro now only 0.028 away there from Pinera. So I'm trying to think now, that is... It's well less than a tenth separating the front 2. Less than a tenth separating the front 3 right now. Monty there in P number 3 is looking to turn his season around. He's shown a lot of pace. He is always one of the drivers we need to keep our eyes on week in and week out. But he has been struck by falling anvil after falling anvil, and that was the case with the Formula Fords last time out here at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, where it looked like he had thrown away the race with a spin coming through the second corner. Then the driver that overtook him for the lead got sucked up into a UFO, and then he ended up getting sucked up into a UFO not very long after. Hopefully we don't have the connection issues here with this race at Canadian Tire here for the Spec Racer Fords. Otherwise, I would have some interesting discussions and interesting theories about whether Bowmanville, Ontario, Canada is like the UFO capital of the globe. But right now, fingers crossed for Monty that he can turn this season around, because while he is P3 in this qualifying session, we've got a 40-minute race ahead of us, so anything can happen.
Yeah, I think, Jorg, like I said, we talked about it, just having a string of bad luck this season, our reigning Masters champion from last season. You don't have to look any further than the front row as it stands now, and looks like that's the way it's going to be. Pinero and Castro on the front row at the start of this race. I predict fireworks. These guys have the reason they're not up challenging for the championship themselves is because they've basically really tried to battle each other, and it's not worked out for either driver, to be fair. They've both had issues. They've both had DNFs in the races where they've had contact with each other. They just battle each other very hard, and I won't say there's no love lost. I don't know if they really interact off the sim or not. But when they're on the track together, it's always interesting to watch. It's not always long, but it's always interesting.
The checkered flag has been at now for about 22 seconds here in this qualifying session. It's still Marco Pinero there at the front at a 129.184. You can see that parking lot forming on the outside of Moss Corner. We'll see some drivers finishing up their lap times here. That's Alice Plevo, who jumps up to P3. That is a very great lap time there from the driver from the Czech Republic to jump up to that second row in the dying stages here of this qualifying session. But still, Pinero and Castro, who we saw trade blows and battle quite hard a few weeks ago at the New Hampshire road course, so I think we may be seeing a repeat of that here as well. I think if my memory serves me correctly, they did come to blows at that round, so I think that both of them are hoping to not have a repeat of that. But still, looking through right now, the top 10 in this qualifying session separated by about a quarter of a second, so with an incredibly close field. The top 25 are separated by less than a second as well. This is going to be an awesome race. What do you think, Charles?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is you know, what I kind of look forward to on my Sunday afternoon is these spec racers. The racing is always so tight. We've got 38, 39 cars on the grid. We're going to have guys coming from the back. I see Naselli sitting back there, not setting a lap time, so he's going to be working his way up through the field, or attempting to. And then we've got the Pinero Castro show up front. Jorg Monty sitting there, kind of waiting to see what happens. He's going to have the best view of that, along with Pleva, who's you know, with the win last week. You know, he's having a really good run, a good string of luck, and a good run on track.
The qualifying session has wrapped up. We're just waiting for a few more stragglers, getting a bit more seat time here in these Spec Racer Fords before it switches over to the race session here. There's only 10 corners here at this track, really only about 8 because they count the 2 bends going down the Mario Andretti straightaway as corners, but still a lot of opportunities to make a mistake here at this circuit. We may see those come to play here in this race. Only time will tell. We'll just have to wait and see, use all of the synonyms to describe what this race may bring, and we're going to get the starting grid for this race, and it's going to be Marco Pinero at the front there in the number 16 car, due to Castro starting alongside him there in P number 2. Alice Pleva with a fantastic qualifying time jumps up to P3 in the dying stages of that session. He'll be starting alongside the top master Jorg Monty, P4 overall. Very nice time from the driver from Switzerland. Then it's Joao Tubino there in P number 5, only about a 10th back. Still, the top 4 separated by less than a 10th. Unbelievable. That's Evandro Dantas completing an all-Brazilian 3rd row. Jason Green there 7th. Jason Perry in P number 8 there. So we've got an all Jason row number 4. Chris Murakami in 9th. Christian Kabanka there in P number 10. Simon Mayer in P 11. Tom Gradwell will round out your top 12. That's Antonio Reese in 13th. Kurt Nunez, who won in Masters last time at VIR, he'll be starting this race in 14th. And Jeff Jacobson will round out your top 15.
Yeah, and 16th, Andrea Fervini. Al McCain in 17th, Claudio Gardini in 18th, Bobby West in 19th, Adam Bradshaw rounds out your top 20. 21st is Philip Berry. 22nd is Pedro Carvalho. 23rd, Trenton Kramer. Brad Cathcart in 24th. 25th is Jeff Fritcher. Wilson Bruzarosco in 26th. Hugh Simpkins in 27th. Manning Grennan in 28th, Paolo Brim in 29th, Josh Wilkie, our buddy, in 30th, Paul Jackson 31st, Brendan Cathcart 32nd, Michelle Biglini 33rd, Russ Telker 34th, Bob Kern 35th, Wayne Buttermore's in 36th, and Mauricio Naselli 37th, Marcus Burkett in 38th, and then rounding out the 39 car grid is Gianni Longan.
I feel like we have to do an over-under to see how far Naselli is going to make his way up through the field. I think he's put on like a combined like 80 passes over the past 2 races here from the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors season thus far. Starting in 37th here tonight. I think a top 10 may be on the cards because this track, very fast, slipstream playing a big role despite only having that one long straightaway, but with plenty of opportunities to make a mistake if you're one of these drivers. I'm sure Naselli is going to cut his way through the field like a hot knife through butter. Charles, where do you see Naselli finishing this race, if you even want to try and pin the tail on the donkey to try and figure out where he may finish?
Well, here's the thing: is he is fast. We've seen it the last 2 weeks. He is going to make his way up to the field in a hurry. that draft, I can't believe we had this long to talk about that, the Mario Andretti straight and the amount of draft these cars are going to get, the run they're going to get down that straight for passing. But the problem is you've got to navigate through that traffic. And this is one of those tracks that it doesn't take much to make one mistake, and then you're going to not take yourself out, but you may end up taking out 2 or 3 other cars. So that's the thing he's got to watch out for. Should he go clean? Yeah, top 10 for sure, maybe even a top 5 because he's just got that kind of pace. So we'll see what happens.
So this seems like a pretty big development, unless our live timing screen is glitched. Oh, I think he may have just popped back onto the screen. Joao Tabino, I don't believe, is taking the start. He's shuffling around with Russell Tekler there, so I think we may have some drivers maybe just popped off on our screen for now, or not actually taking the start. I think Joao Tabino may not even be taking the green flag here. So, oh no, are we going to have a repeat of the alien abductions we saw?
He is the first person to be abducted today. Yes.
Oh Lord, I think we may need to play the X-Files theme at the end of this broadcast. It looked like Marco Pinero wasn't on screen at first. I was getting terrified that our pole sitter wasn't going to start this race, but already Nazelli up a few positions, and we haven't even taken the green. That man is ridiculous. He can pass cars legally even before we even grab the green flag here of this race, which is coming in a few moments' time. You can see that Porsche pace car trundling its way around the second to last corner here, turn number 9. Then he's going to make that hard right-hand turn to go down pit road and put the field in the hand of your pole sitter, Marco Pinero. He's leading them to green, which is coming out just about now. The green flag is out, and the drivers are on their way into turn number 1. It's not a long run at all before they have to turn in there, and it's going to be Pinero leading them due to Castro there in second. Pleva remaining in P3, but he may be challenged here by York Monty, who's looking around the outside. Has a back out of it there, exiting turn number 1. Now careening their way into turn number 2 on the first lap here of this race. I gotta imagine we may see one driver fall out, at least on this first lap here. They're all getting through clean. I think I may not even a puff of smoke farther in the back, but 3, nearly 4 wide, heading into turn number 3. Do these drivers fear no death? Ooh, some rally action farther up towards the front of the field, but so far, all these drivers surprisingly negotiating lap 1 clean. They're heading their way through turn number 4, the very tricky downhill turn number 4, before they have to slam on the brakes, get woed up, heading into Moss, and it is a good overtaking opportunity if you're one of these drivers, but also good overtaking opportunity if a driver makes some sort of major mistake, which no driver has so far. I probably just jinxed it. We're going to see a major accident here in the not too distant future, but right now all these drivers going down the Mario Andretti straightaway for the first time, and I think everyone has gone away with lap 1 scot-free so far. Scott clean, whatever. I'm going completely flustered as we're seeing 4 wide action going down the Mario Andretti straightaway. One of these drivers has to back out, but neither of them are. Ooh, there we go. They file out 2 by 2 as they went through the third to last corner of turn number 8, but 4 wide going down the Mario Andretti straightaway. I said right at the start of this race, and I'll say it again, completing lap 1, these drivers fear no death, and it is awesome to see.
Yeah, it was a great start to the race. Everybody got through clean, no issues. And even going through 2 wide through Moss Corner for a lot of those guys, successfully navigated. So great start to the race, and it bodes well for a good race from start to finish. Here we go.
And I gotta imagine in this race, it is going to be it's going to be a dogfight. What we're gonna see. You could also describe it as a 100-mile-an-hour game of leapfrog. We usually use that synonym and euphemism to describe the racing in the Ray esports series here on Tuesday. But here with the Spec Racer Fords, it definitely rings true here at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. The field is still, you can cover all these cars with a pretty sizable blanket. Pinero leads over Castro about a half a second, separating the front 3 as things stand at the moment towards the end of lap 2. But going through the rest of the field, oh, there we go. We have our first Shamazel of this race, and that's Breza Roscoe there in the 444 car. And our old buddy Josh Wilkie going for a spin there along with him, a sympathy spin. I think there may have been a little bit of contact that brought that incident on. We may have to take a look at a replay to see what in the world happened there. And oh, that's such a shame. For our buddy, we can't really slander him too much, otherwise he is going to have a word with us on the Ray Esports broadcast this upcoming Tuesday that me and Charles are a part of. I think, it might have been these two. Oh, boy, no. That's a big curb whack there from Josh heading into Moss. Oh, and you could say a little bit of like the universe punishing Josh there for sending Brzezinski there into a spin. That was a significant curb whack too. I think I saw the underside of Josh Wilkie's car there as he hit that curb entering Moss. But already we have our first Shamazo. I doubt very highly it's going to be the last.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But yeah, that's the thing about Moss. Like I said, it's you know, too wide to get through there. Too wide on the first lap was a great job by the guys. But the entry curve there on the inside, you can't use it very much, as Josh pointed out for us and was able to explain or to demonstrate, I should say. Yeah, so you know, it's just one of those really tricky corners that you just have to get it right every time, every lap through. And if we're going to have a dogfight, I mean, you know, Philip Berry would be the guy that I would put my money on, right? He is driving the World War II vintage fighter aircraft paint scheme. So
it would be very fitting, though, if we see a dogfight from a car that is painted after a fighter jet. Yes, well. He's not driving an F-18, he's driving the 888 SRF, so I guess it kind of works. I'm going to abandon that euphemism. But he's currently running the top of the S2 drivers right now in 21st, so we'll see him maybe try and force the issue here because he has no car separating himself and Simpkins there, and barely any air as well, about 0.3 of a second separating them as they go through the second to last, and now the final corner here. At the end of lap number 3, this race is already blowing by fairly quickly. There's going to be a whole lot of laps for these drivers to post on the board. A fairly short lap here around Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. It's a fast circuit here for these Spec Racer Fords, and it's only 2.46 miles long. Actually, it's longer than Oschersleben that we were seeing for the Formula Fords earlier on this afternoon, but still this track is very fun, very flowing, and it feels like it goes by in a heartbeat. So all these drivers are going to be punishing their tires and trying to find any sort of way to get past them. I think Duda Castro has been punishing his car. Is that a little bit of front end damage that I see on the front of the 73?
Yeah, it definitely looks that way. It looks like he's may have already kind of given the fiberglass horn to somebody, probably at the start of the race. You know, it was tightly packed, so it wouldn't surprise me if there's a little bumping going on there. But we do see Monty has now moved up to 30s past Pleva, as we see another wreck, and it's coming out of Moss, and that's Adam Bradshaw, the 20 car as well. Was that Trenton Kramer? Jeff Jacobson off in the gravel on the outside.
I think that was a big accident heading through turn number 5. I thought my graphics were having a mild panic attack. I was just seeing all the drivers shuffling around, and it turns out this is what was causing it. This is Paolo Bremi heading into Moss Corner here. I think he may have had to pull off some sort of heroics to avoid all the drama that happened farther. Oh, no. Didn't pull off any sort of heroics to avoid it. He just piled straight into it. That was a pretty significant whack, too. A lot of damaged SRF cars with that incident heading through Moss, and this is Adam Bradshaw. We're following him heading into the corner, the driver of the number 929 car, and all that chaos happens farther in front of him, and I think it was just a small little bit of contact there. Oh, big contact, and it's bumper cars. Oh, yeah. Big case of bumper cars as they went through turn number 5.
Yeah, some of it was from the initial incident, can really tell who that was, and some of it was from just trying to avoid and rejoin, and that was where a lot of the extra carnage came from. We're going to get another view here from Samuli. We get Jacobson coming down here out of coming into Moss as well. Again, yeah, just everybody just stacked up. I mean, it looked like there was anything going on. Is maybe just somebody got a little late on the brakes, or maybe was offline a little bit and had to check up in the corner and caused everybody else behind them to crash. Oh no! And there's Naselli. Speaking of crash.
Oh no. Oh, I think we may have jinxed him. We haven't talked about before the start of these races the past 2 weeks about how many positions he could claw up, about where he may end up at the end of these 40-minute races. Then we talk about him here before the start of this 40-minute classic here at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, and then he ends up in the barriers with a very crumpled up Spec Racer Ford car. Thankfully, these cars aren't made out of carbon fiber. They're made out of fiberglass, so the estimated damage with all of that being and banging through turn number 5 was probably about $7. But I would bet $7 that York Monty is very happy that he's in the lead of this race now, about 0.3 of a second gap between himself and Marco Pinero there in P number 2. So I'm not sure how Monty got the lead, but he has it now, and he's starting to pull away, trying to find any way he can to pull a little bit of a margin here, with the slipstream still being incredibly powerful right now. The field is separated by basically nothing. The top 16 separated by 7.5 seconds already, 8 minutes into this race here. So just still, these cars drift so well. Even at a track with one long straightaway, one straightaway of note, they're still glued together, and it puts on some pretty good racing. So we're not really complaining about this. It's just a small little observation.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and my guess is that that's exactly how he got the lead. Was he was that third car in line and was just able to draft up and pass on the straightaway. Might get another view of that with Pinero and Castro here in just a second, as you see the speed building and the cars closing. We see Castro moving to the inside, or to the right side will be the inside of the first corner, and he makes the move successfully. And yeah, so it's very similar to what we just saw there. My guess is Monty just did the same thing. And we talked about this a lot, but we talk about Green, sitting back there in fourth. That's really where he likes to be, is in his comfort zone. He's just basically back there saving fuel, using the draft to his advantage so he can have that quick pit stop. Monty is the opposite side of that coin. Monty is he's even told me during interviews he doesn't really like to do a lot of fuel savings, so he's 100% of the time. So he's already made his way to the front. Is he going to see if he can get a gap on these guys?
Well, I think most racers are really, they don't like the idea of taking it easy. They're racers. They want to push it to the absolute limit. Personally, I like saving fuel mainly because I am not a very good driver. That's the main reason I'm behind a microphone instead of behind a steering wheel. But that is something that we may have to, one of these drivers may have to consider here before the pit stops come. We saw in the Formula Ford race at Oschersleben earlier on today how fuel saving was a big factor of that race. And keep in mind, the Formula Ford cars, they don't draft all too well. They don't punch as big of a hole as these Spec Racer Ford cars do. They don't have as strong of a draft, certainly in that Formula Ford race. While we did see the front fairly close throughout the first stint of that, we wouldn't see the likes of, was this the top 11 separated by only 3 seconds? We wouldn't see a train of this magnitude in the Formula Fords, but fuel saving was a big factor in that race, and it's going to be a huge, ginormous factor here in these Spec Racer Ford races. It usually is when the strategy is a big role, they have a pit stop to contend with. It's always a factor. Will we see one of these drivers bite the bullet and just focus entirely on fuel saving to try and shave off a few seconds when it comes time for those pit stops?
I think you basically, outside those top three, I think from Green back to probably Cabanca are all looking at that. They're all looking at their fuel numbers, saying how much am I saving, how much shorter is my pit stop going to be, how much less fuel am I going to need to take. So yeah, I think that's a big part of the strategy. I think the front three guys, just like racing, I think, like you said, so they're going to battle hard. I think Castro will be trying to save. I don't know how much he's going to be able to with Monty and Pinero around him. So that's one of those things we'll have to keep an eye on. He's usually good about getting his fuel mileage at least close. Sometimes he doesn't quite get it on the mark, but he's usually pretty tight when it comes to getting the right amount of fuel. As we see, Jason Perry going around that inside curb. It's so dangerous, as you see right there. You just take too much of it, and it just kind of hooks the tires, and it just brings the car around. As we see Cathcart as well on the outside of that same Moss corner.
Ooh, that's a big mistake there for one of the drivers involved in that very close championship fight in Masters, currently running P21, and just got overtaken by Bradshaw there, so that's not going to be ideal for his hopes at being involved in that championship fight in the Masters category. Still have 6 races after this, so it's definitely not all said and done in that category. Monty is having a fantastic race. I think with me saying that, I probably just jinxed it, and he's going to get hit by a falling anvil in about 5 minutes' time. But a man who we said said at the start of this, and we said in the Formula Ford broadcast as well, if he didn't have bad luck throughout both of these seasons, whether it be in the Formula Fords or the Spec Racer Fords, he would have no luck at all. He's just had so many strange and bizarre incidents befall him so far, and right now this is the smoothest race he's had so far. We're 12.5 minutes in. He's leading this race over Dude Castro and Marco Pinero, who are incredibly potent racers in their own regard. Jorg Mani, I mean, as a Masters driver, he's always up towards the front, but even just overall speaking, if he was an S1, he would be a contender for podiums week in and week out. You always love to see some very good drivers and some interclass mingling as well. Right now, looking through the top 25 we have on our screen right now, most of them are made up by Masters and S1 drivers right now. It's currently P2 down to P7. Castro and Dantas are S1 drivers, and we've got Mayer, kind of a straggler between a nice sandwich of Masters drivers right towards the tail end of this train that we have here. Then Nunez and P11 a little bit farther back. Then Favini, Gardini, and West there. It's kind of funny that Gardini and Favini there are right next to each other on the racetrack. Speaking of right next to each other on the racetrack, that's Kabanka going for a move on Pleva. Pleva has not had a good turn of pace as of late. He's dropped back like a rock, now down to P6. So the driver that started this race in P3, struggling a teeny tiny bit. He's not really forcing the issue here. Ooh, Chris Murakami nearly going off the track, going through the second, actually that was going through the final corner there. He nearly speared off the circuit there. Still running in P number 10, but getting back to the point that I mentioned, we're seeing a mixed up order as things stand at the moment. A lot of Masters and S2 drivers breaking up what's usually an S1 dominant at the front.
Yeah, and so a couple of things. So, you talked about Monty being up toward the front, and the way they configure the way they do the points here is, even though they have 3 different classes, where you finish in the race is what your points allocation. So even if you're a Masters driver, if you finish 3rd overall, you're going to get 3rd overall points. If you finish, if you're the second guy in Masters in the class and you finish 10th, you get 10th overall points. So last season, Jorg Mani had the highest point total of any driver in the field. So that means his average overall finish was the best of every driver, and that's as a Masters driver. So obviously extremely talented. So it's there's no surprise that he's up there running in the front, because that's where I expect him to be, is up there challenging for overall wins, because I've seen him do it since I've started doing the broadcast here on the Weekend Warrior Series.
I feel like I may have to draw a reference to another broadcast here on Apex Racing TV that I was a part of this past season, that being the Apex Racing Academy F4 Championship. We had a driver by the name of Vetty Wellen, who I called throughout that entire season as Vetty Wheelman Wellen, and he was one heck of a wheelman. He ended up taking the Pro Championship in the Season 3 of the Apex Racing Academy F4 Championship. I feel like I need to give a similar name to Monty, so I think maybe Machine Man Monty, maybe we could try a nickname like that. Ooh, Pleva now trying to find a way to get past Kabanka. Those two were involved in a nice little battle about 2 laps ago now. Now they're continuing to heat up here. Currently on lap number 11, 15.5 minutes now on the board of this 40-minute race, and we're seeing some drivers come into the pits already. We saw it, I think it was before we even broke past the 10-minute barrier, maybe a little bit after that, but we're seeing some drivers start to come down pit road, maybe by their own volition, maybe because they had some sort of damage and had to come in to serve a meatball penalty. Either way, ooh, nice draft there. Nice drift there from Antonio Reese. I mean, he's going to lose the drift if he has many incidents like that coming through Moss. However, that was a beautiful drift there from the driver currently running in P9.
Yeah, and to add another point to that is, some of these tracks are, the Masters drivers, is their ages where they're, how they're split out, not necessarily their I rating. And some of these tracks, because of their technical nature, like CTMP, the Spec 2 guys are lower I-rated guys, so they're newer to the service. And so a lot of times when you get to a technical track like this, you won't see a lot of the Spec 2 guys running up toward the front of the field, just because it's a little more difficult, and it takes some time to get used to racing this. Anybody that's ever driven this track will tell you it's one of those tracks that takes practice to get good at.
Ooh, Pleva is on the charge. I think he took the message I was saying that he was dropping back like a rock. He took that to heart because at one point he was running in P6. He's now gone back up to P number 4, so we may see him try and challenge Panero to move up to the position that he started this race from. Of course, Monty leading. He won't be able to overtake the car that he started in front of unless something major happens. You never know here from the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors. But we're 17 and a half minutes into this race. We may see some drivers duck into the pits here fairly early on. I will say, breaking the fourth wall a little bit here on this broadcast, we actually had a message during a qualifying session from our buddy Josh Wilkie, who actually came into the pits not very long ago, talking about how much the traffic was affecting the qualifying session earlier on this broadcast. And I think here with the race, it's going to affect it as well. Ooh, we got big Schmalzel here. That's Brema involved in. Oh no, it's the worst commentator's jinx in the world. Josh, I think he's going flat out into the barrier, and not an ideal race for the hometown hero there. Man, I think I may have to issue out a wholehearted apology to our producer on the Formula Ford side of things here for the Weekend Warriors broadcast, Josh. And we're going to take a look now at the replay to see what in the heck happened here. And no. It's I think Brema maybe I think there's about a half a car width that he could have gone farther towards that grass.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate there, well before the halfway mark of the race.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I want to give anybody any fault in that. I think that was just side-by-side racing. Brim had a good run, was on the inside of the turn 1, which gave him the outside of turn 2, and it was just unfortunate. It might have been a little bit of net code. I think sometimes you'll get those guys, they get too close together and net code starts kind of, wants to magnetize the cars for whatever reason. And it pulls them together, and then the next thing you know, both have wrecked. But, just like some hard racing, probably both drivers could have given a little more room. But that's just the way it goes sometimes.
Well, I think we may have to put out some alcohol right in front of the broadcast booth door for our producer Josh to pick up after this race. Not an ideal race meeting for him. He's a very fast driver, new to the series as well. He's doing his this is his 6th race here from the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors. I mean, from what he's told us, he's absolutely loving it, but sadly not the best race meeting here at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. He's still out there on track, I believe, so we'll see him try and claw his way up through the field. He's done it before. He was involved in that incident with Brezarosco earlier on in this race, and he clawed up inside the top 25. So it's definitely not over, although he definitely has some pretty major damage to fix on that Spec Racer Ford. Speaking of damage, it's Castro there still with it's nothing major, but it is possibly slowing him down a little bit as Pleva is now trying to get the move done to move into second. He moved into third right under our nose, and now he's trying to slide his way up into second. I think he may have gotten a little bit of a bump there from Panero in that small little flat out stretch between turns 2 and 3 there. But Pleva, who won last time at VIR, is currently running P3, where he started this race from, and he has a very fast race car, and it's basically a spotless race car. May have a little bit of rear end damage after that contact that he and Panero made coming through turn 2 and 3 there. However, Pleva has a very clean race car. He's a very fast race car driver, and if he can replicate the pace that he had last time out at VIR where he took a dominant win, I think he may be a driver we need to keep our eyes on the second half of this race, Charles.
Absolutely. Yeah, he had a great run last week, and he's having a really good run this week, and I think he's using the draft to his advantage. So he's working his way back up after falling down a few positions, but he's been comfortably inside the top 10 during the entire race. It seemed like I saw a car off there. Yeah, Jeff Jacobson just towed. So I think he had an issue in Moss Corner again as well. So tough luck for Jacobson as we see another car off. That's Cath Cart, the 242, towing back to the pits. Maybe there's a reason both of those cars towed back to the pits within about 3 corners.
This may be it here. This is Jacobson. He's actually all by himself going down the Mario Andretti straightaway. May have clipped the grass heading into the third to last corner here. Actually,
oh wow!
God, what in the world happened there? Did he have must have been some mechanical issue, maybe like a technical issue. Just made him go flat out there.
He was involved in that incident in Moss Corner earlier in the race, so maybe he had some suspension or wheel damage he was fighting. in the car as we see that. It's just a classic curb, too much curb on the outside. Maybe it gets in the grass and loses the rear, and it's across the track and into the wall nose first. So maybe that's what was going on with Jacobson. Maybe he had some wheel suspension damage. He was just kind of fighting the steering and just maybe miscalculated that corner just a bit, or over or undercompensated for what he was trying to deal with, and caught the inside curb and went for a nice little flight.
That was, I think, one of the first times I've ever seen a Spec Racer Ford car fly. Maybe the reason why I got so much air, I think what could have been, going back to the other UFO discussion that we talked about, Canadian Tire Motorsports Park for the Formula Fords last week, we'll bring it up again here as well. Maybe an alien took over his car and like possessed him and turned him there into the inside way too early. Ooh, speaking of early, this is Juice Skimptons who won at VIR in the S2 category last time out. Coming into the pits fairly early. I think he was running in third, if not second, in the S2 category. So very early pit stop from him.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's in, normally we would have cars that go in, the 12, 15 minute mark. So the fact that we haven't had anybody taking pit stops, as I look down the list now, we do have a few. Let's see, Trenton Kramer, Fritcher has pitted, Gradwell has pitted, look like for standard service, Marcus Burkett, Manning Grennan, and Alan McCain. So yeah, pit stops are coming now. So we've got about another 8 or so minutes left before you've waited too long and you run out of fuel. So we'll be seeing the rest of the field come in very short order.
Ooh, Pleva going for a move around the outside, going through turn number 8, and he gets the move done. Alice Pleva becomes the leader of this race, rounding the final corner here, about to start lap 17 in a few moments' time, and he's going to be the first driver to put a lap in the lead on the board. And for quite some time, I think Monty took the lead of the race, probably about, just doing the math in my head, probably about 10 laps ago. So it's going to be Pleva taking the lead of the race, being the third leader of this race that we've had so far. I don't think he'll be the last, though, because we're going to see all these drivers come into pits, and we'll see the drivers that come in a little bit early, such as Pedro Carvalho, who's now trundling his way down pit road and now going into his pit box. We may see some of the drivers that came in a little bit early actually jump up to the lead in the not too distant future. I'm not sure. We'll see. The strategy is going to be big here. It is a big fight here going through turn number 4. Monty, it looked like he was going to try and go side by side going through the very fast and seemingly endless left-hander of turn number 4. Had to back out of it, though, and right now we're actually seeing a little bit of a gap develop between Pleva and Monty, about 0.7 of a second, which is it's a gap that can be decreased in the matter of seconds here at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, with the draft being so powerful, and we're seeing it right now. The gap that briefly exceeded 0.7 of a second is now teetering around 0.5 a second and closing very fastly. The gap between Monty and Castro is definitely closing. They're going side by side going into turn number 8 here. Castro sweeps around the outside and gets the move done there to move into P number 2. So Dudu Castro, who started this race up towards the front, has run up at the front throughout a vast majority of it, is now getting it done. Ooh, now Panero going for the bold move to go into the pits, the first of the drivers in that massive train of cars at the very tail, at the very front of this field, coming in on lap number 17, at the end of lap 17, merging into lap 18. He passes that very damaged car that we saw go off earlier on in this race, and you can see now Favini involved in a nice battle. This is with himself and Gardini right towards the tail end of the top 10. I'm surprised I haven't mixed up Gardini and Favini yet. They have very similar names, and they've basically every time we've seen them, they have been right next to each other on the race course. So God have mercy on both me and Charles trying to decide which one's which.
Yeah, for sure. That seems to happen more often than not. You get those names that will trip you up there from time to time if you're not careful. They just end up together at points of the race. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Panero. He came out in P17. He's right behind Jackson, one of the Spec 2 drivers in P16. So he's got some guys in front he can draft off of. So it's just a matter of catching those at the right time, making sure you can get the draft and get clear before we get into corners that they may be a little slower than you. So we're going to see if this early, I guess, undercut pays off for him.
Well, I think he's in a pretty good position on track. He doesn't have a whole lot of traffic slowing him down, but he has one car in front of him punching a big hole in the air where he can draft up and get a little bit of speed compared to his competitors. I may take a look at my live timing screen just to see what kind of speeds these drivers have been clocking so far in this race. Alice Pleva has set a fastest speed of 122 miles an hour. He's been in the drift throughout the vast majority of it, but then you've got the likes of Christian Gabanka and Simon Mayer who have been in the 126s, and then Antonio Reese has actually clocked a 128 so far. So a lot of these drivers having quite a lot of pace going down that start-finish straightaway. Panero, meanwhile, also in the 128 barrier. So we'll see what he can do now that he has a clean track in front of him. He isn't going to be suckling upon the fantastic benefits of that straight line speed and slipstream going down that Mario Andretti straightaway, but he has a clear track in front of him. He won't have to worry about lap traffic or any traffic of the sort. We'll have to see if Panero can pull away and actually be able to leapfrog ahead of the likes of Castro, Pleva, and Mani at the front, currently occupying your top 3 positions as things stand at the moment. But the battles are very hot all throughout this field. Cabanca and Green going side by side now, going down the Mario Andretti straightaway. Will we see a replay? Oh no, you can see Castro going for the move there on Pleva, going into turn number 8, and now Mani looking to follow, but he's going to be stuck on the outside line heading through the second to last bend. So unless Mani can stick it, which he has, ooh, now they're coming into the pits there. So I was thinking Mani was going to have that inside line. He cuts incredibly close to that inside barrier there to come into the pits. So Castro and Mani, who very briefly were 1-2, have now come into the pits. One of the first drivers, the first duo of the drivers running in that massive train at the front of the field to come in. We'll see how they exit compared to the likes of Panero, who's currently running in P16. We'll just see how these two exit out. Mani is already out and away, as is Castro. Thankfully, Mani not getting hit by a falling anvil like he did in the Formula Ford race earlier on this afternoon. But there you can see Mani increasing that gap between himself and Castro. Castro had a terrible pit stop. Not sure what in the world happened to him, but he has lost out on a tremendous amount of time.
Yeah, so it was somebody was trying to give us some information, and yeah, Mani with a good pit stop this time. Both of them come out in front of Panero, so obviously the undercut not necessarily helping Panero out. It's a pretty sizable gap between those 3 cars now, so it's going to be where the rest of the field comes out in the pits as to where these guys blend in with the next set of pitting cars, and then we'll be race on for the finish here, the last 10 minutes of the race.
I feel like what may have hurt Panero the most was the fact that car that he had the massive slipstream from right in front of him when he exited the pits came into the pits about a lap later, so I think that may have been what hurt him. The leader of the race, Pleva, has now come into the pits. He has a nice drift going over the bumps there on pit entry, but Pleva from the lead of the race has come in. Cabanca has now inherited the lead as a result. Dantas coming in as well, as is Gardini. So all these drivers running up towards the front have trickled their way into the pits. We have less than 10 minutes left on the clock here, so we're going to see these drivers flood into pit road here in the not too distant future. We'll see. Mani has come back in as well. I wonder, did he pick up some kind of speeding penalty? Is this what happened to Jorg Mani? Oh no, I mean, actually, according to our producer Samuli, he was only stopped in the pits for 4 seconds, so maybe that's the reason why he had a big gap between himself and Castro. He wasn't able to take enough gas. Oh my god, that is, again, the falling anvil striking Jorg Mani. He led this race for about 10 laps and was looking to be on the up and up in this race, having a massive gap between himself and Castro, but it's because he had fuel issues in the Formula Ford race earlier on this afternoon. That's one of the reasons why he was sputtering coming down to take the checkered flag in that race, and it may be biting him again here in the Spec Racer Ford's heartbreak for the driver in the Masters category.
Yeah, we just saw a shot there of Carvalho and Simpkins. That's the current battle for the Spec 2 lead. Both of the cars off in the grass. so they're taking the term battle seriously, and they're running 14th and 15th overall. So yeah, tough luck for Mani. Just it's, you hate it because he's such a great driver, and I know we talked to him last season. This season he's out here having fun, But sometimes these mistakes got to just be a little frustrating. It's one thing to just go out and have fun and race the car, but then you're up battling for the lead, and then all of a sudden, you either something happens and you don't get enough fuel in the car, you have to come back in for a second time. It's just it's I'm sure it's a little frustrating for him, even though he's just out having a good Sunday.
So now I think the fight at the front of the Masters category is going to be between Antonio Reese and Chris Murakami. Actually, a little bit of, that's a pretty big gap separating those two as things stand at the moment. So Reese is currently in the lead of the Masters category, and he has come into the pits. So that is on merit. Monty with that second pit stop. I described it as a kick in the shins earlier on this afternoon, but I think I'll skip the euphemisms. That's a kick in the nuts for Monty, and he's gotten so many. You gotta feel bad for the guy. It's so unfortunate. The bad luck that he's had throughout this entire season, you could describe it as tragic even. Right now, we're seeing a fight between Meyer and Green. So Green, well, both of these drivers have not come into the pit. Simon Meyer, who we haven't really talked about throughout this broadcast, in the number 5 car, is currently leading it as things stand at the moment. We may see these two come their way into the pits here. Actually, no, they're staying at, oh no, you can see their Green breaking away there, so he is pitting from P2, and Mayer staying out yet again. I think he stayed out a little bit long last time out, so I think we may be seeing a mirror strategy here from Simon Mayer, doing 2 weeks in a row and staying out for quite a long ways.
Yep, I think you're absolutely right. He's managed to save enough fuel that he could go that extra lap at the 33-minute mark, so he's going to come in around the 35-ish minute mark of the race. So great fuel economy by Mayer for sure.
I think he was involved. It was a part of that massive train, so I think he just had the draft, and that could be the reason why he's been able to stretch the legs so long in that Spec Racer 4. He's got to be running on fumes at this point, as we see very close stuff between Avenger Dantes and Jason Green as he exited the pits. We nearly saw a replay, and we nearly saw an identical incident to what happened to our buddy Josh earlier on in this race, so thankfully they get away with that scot-free without any sort of damage on those Spec Racer Ford race cars. Some scuffed plexiglass, some scuffed fiberglass, some twisted up metal here so far in this Spec Racer Ford race, but it's been surprisingly clean, it must be said. We've seen some incidents, some schmozzles, and we had that big bumper car moment coming through that corner of Moss towards the start of this race, but right now it is going to be a dogfight at the front of this thing. Castro is leading as things stand at the moment. Well, actually, he is the net leader of the race. Still, it's Meyer who's actually just come into the pits, so Meyer is going to relinquish the lead, a 22-second gap between himself there and Castro. So he is going to drop down the running order, but not a whole lot either. I think he's still going to be exiting out in front of Antonio Reese, who's currently P8 and the top of the Masters drivers as things stand at the moment. It's still Drew Skimskins at the front of the S2 category as well, currently running P14 overall, but I think all of our attention is split throughout this entire field. The S2 fight is incredibly close here, as we may see Carvalho go for a move on Simpkins to take the lead of the S2 category and take P14 overall, gets a move done around the outside, coming through turn number 8. Nicely played there from the Portuguese driver. I'm sure that battle is going to heat up between now and the checkered flag. We've got a whole lot of battles to keep our eyes on at the front of the S2 category and at the front overall. Simon Mayer exited in 4th. That is incredible. Wow. Ooh, that was a big snap there from Pleva entering turn number 3.
That really was. And yeah, he came out right in the middle of that pack. And this pack, the gap that they had was pretty spread out. And then all of a sudden, they're all back together again. So, it's going to be this group of 7 cars battling for the race win. And as I'm sitting here listening to some driver chat amongst them, they're talking about strategies amongst each other. So it's going to be last 3 laps or so here between Pleva, Castro, Pinero, Mayer, Dantas, Green, and Cabanca for the overall win. It could be any one of these 7 cars at this point.
And you just saw Pleva and Mayer blow off Castro and Pinero's doors as they went down Mario Andretti straight away there at the end of lap 24. So we don't have a whole lot of time left to go. I think they're going to be grabbing the 2 to go this time by. So we are approaching crunch time for these drivers. And I think I'm trying to put myself in the driver's shoes here to try and think of what I would want to do if I were one of these drivers, and the strategy is going to play a big role, not including the pit strategy that we've already seen play out, but the strategy in terms of where to place yourself on track and where to be here on this last lap. Ooh, Pleva is going to be off the track there. He runs incredibly wide coming through turn number 2, and Pleva, who briefly retook the lead of this race after leading it earlier on, has dropped back like a rock. That rally action coming through turn number 2 is going to do him no favors. Now dropping down to P number 7 and losing touch of Kabanka at the tail end of this train right in front of him. So Pleva, who was leading this race, may have just given it to Simon Mayer. He certainly gave up his chances, and any sort of prayer and hope in hell that he had of winning this race, I think, has gone out the window. They're going to be taking 2 to go this time by, I believe. So Simon Mayer is going to be leading them in crunch time here for this race. Meanwhile, in the S2 category, Carvalho and Simpkins are still incredibly close there, heading through turn number 4 this time by. Will we see a move down the inside? Will we see a driver back at it? You can see the bumps hitting these drivers so hard. The patchy asphalt here on this old skin of Canadian Tire Motorsports Park more resembles my face back when I was 14 instead of a racing surface. 3 wide going down the back straightaway there. That was Castro in the middle of a fight between himself, Green, and Mayer there. I am shocked they got away with that without any sort of fisticuffs breaking or a driver spinning off like a top into the outside barrier. But Mayer is going to be leading them with about 2 minutes left to go on the board, so they will be taking the white flag next time by. And Mayer, who we thought was going to be lucky to be inside the top 8, is actually in a pretty good position to win this race. It shows you how big of a role the strategy plays here in these Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors races.
Yeah, and I don't think that those guys in the back of this group are out of it. I think even Pleva has already kind of caught the tail end because of the battling up here up front. Those up front battles will just bring these guys closer together. So don't think they're out of it yet. Obviously, he's a little, a step behind, but still a lot of racing left to do. With a lap and a half to go, getting ready for the next time down the draft straight, and we're going to see where people end up after this one.
Going down into the Mario Andretti straightaway for the second to last time. You can see, I think that's Wayne Buttermore and another car farther up the road. Will the lap traffic play a role in this finish? That would be a big wrench thrown in the works here of this fight. You can see now Pinero pulling out to try and get a move done there on Castro. The slipstream is so powerful here for these drivers, and with not a whole lot of fuel in these race cars, they are light and nimble, and we're going to see them battle hard. That's Pinero it looked like he was going to try and go for a move around the outside of Mayer. Coming through turn number 8 just wasn't close enough to get the job done. We're seeing Kabanka and Green and Castro lock steady in a nice fight. Ooh, Green going a little bit off there. Coming around the final corner, we are on the white flag, so we have one more lap to go here in this Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors race. Now 9 corners left to go here to decide who's going to take the checkered flag, the top of these drivers. The fight farther in the back between the 2 drivers in S2, currently running P1 and P2 in that category, is broken up a little bit. Is now actually Carvalho is coming into the pits. I think maybe the reason why I dropped back a teeny tiny bit is because of him maybe under fueling that race car, running out of gas. So maybe that's the reason he's had to come into the pits. That is heartbreak there. Oh, and Pleva going off the track yet again, coming through turn number 3. Not a good turn of fortune for the Czech driver who started this race in 3rd, was leading for quite some time, but sadly for him, it is seemingly unraveled here. Mayer is leading them coming out of Moss for the final time, but I think by the time they get the end of the Mario Andretti straightaway, it is going to be entirely different. The gap is about 0.3 of a second separating Mayer and Pinero. Going down the back straightaway here, you can see him weaving, pulling off the snaking move to try and break that slipstream. It's a vain attempt though. That gap was 0.3 of a second. Now it is halved. It's closing, less than a tenth now. Pinero is going to try and go for the move around the outside, heading into turn number 8. Who is going to prevail in this fight? It's going to be very close between those two. Making contact, the Pinero goes spinning off the track and goes for a one-way trip into the outside tire barrier. I think he may rejoin the track and may collect another car. No, he actually rejoined fairly clean, but Mayer was the one that sent him off into that spin, and Mayer is also going to be the one taking the checkered flag. Simon Mayer wins here at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. Meanwhile, right towards the tail end of the top 10, it's going to be close here between Bobby West, Favini, and Gardini there. He is going to split out the tricky name duo there right towards the tail end of the top 10. Juice Simpkins here in P12 overall. It looks like he is going to be taking the checkered flag, the top of the S2 drivers, and It really him having a massive gap between himself and Jackson in P18. It doesn't show how close of a fight that was all throughout this race between himself and this man, Carvalho. However, Simpkins is the one holding off in that fight to finish this race. P12 overall, P1 top of the S2 drivers. And it ended up being Antonio Reese. Lost in all that drama, Antonio Reese took the checkered flag in P7, the top of the Masters drivers. And we're just seeing some more drivers just barely coming across the finish line now. Trent Kramer will round out your top 20, but man, Charles, I really love these cars around Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. I know usually for the Ray Esports series that we cover together on Tuesdays, they usually stick to American tracks since it's the unofficial Sports Car Club of America League. But man, I would really want to see these cars race around Canadian Tire Motorsports Park more often, because if the racing in the Ray Esports Racing League at half the distance is as close and exciting as we saw here from this 40-minute race from the Weekend Warriors, I would want to see that basically every week.
Yo, absolutely. Yeah, this is always a great race with the spec racers, just because of the way they draft, the way the cars handle, the way these drivers perform week in and week out. Great win by Mayer with a great strategy to just run the car dry and do his fuel saving, and was able to extend his race before that pit stop, and gets the win against a pretty stacked field back there behind him with Cabanca, Green, Castro, Panero, and Pleva. And I kind of feel bad for a couple of guys as we're looking down the order. Phil Berry, I'm going to say he looks like he took a pit road speeding on entry penalty just based on his stoppage time. Was leading the S2 category, but great job by Simpkins. Had a great battle with Carvalho. And then a shout out to Marcus Burkett. He was back there with Naselli at the start of the race, so ended up P16, up to 22 positions.
We'll go through the results here from this race. A lot of drivers having feast or famine's afternoon here from the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors. It was feast for Simon Mayer, who we thought was barely going to squeak his way inside the top 8. He ends up winning it overall there. Fantastic run from the German driver to win this race, and it's Christian Cabanca there in P number 2. Jason Green in third, a nice drive from him as well due to Castro. Ends up this race in P number 4, Marco Panero, who I gotta imagine is kicking himself or is a little bit upset with how he was raced towards the end. Ends up in a somewhat disappointing P5 for the Italian that started this race from the pole. That's Pleva there in P number 6. He would have been another factor in that fantastic lead fight. Sadly for him, it all unraveled towards the end of this. Antonio Reese ends up finishing this race in P number 7, the top of the Masters drivers. That's Andre Favini, Bobby West, and Claudio Gradini rounding out your top 10. Chris Murakami ends up in P11 overall, P2 of the Masters. Drew Skimpins there finishes in P number 12, the top of the drivers in the S2 class. Adam Bradshaw finishes in lucky number 13. That's Alan McCain there in 14th. Jorg Mani in P15. He's going to be kicking himself after the way things went for him here this afternoon. Marcus Burkett in 17th. Manning Grinnan there in P17. Paul Jackson in 18th. Pedro Carvalho with that heartbreaking pit stop at the dying stages of this race ends up in P19 with Trent Kramer rounding at your top 20.
Yeah, and 21st, it was Wilson Bruzarosco. 22nd, Gianni Longan. Jeff Richard, 23rd. Philip Berry, 24th. Tom Gradwell, 25th. 26th was Michelle Viglini. Wayne Buttermore in 27th. Evandro Dantas, one lap down in 28th. Kurt Nunez in 29th. Brad Cathcart in 30th. Bob Kern in 31st. And 32nd was Paolo Brim. Brendan Cathcart in 33rd. Jeff Jacobson in 34th. Josh Wilkie, 35th. Jason Perry, 36th. Maurizio Naselli, 37th. And then Joao Tabino, our solo alien abduction for the race today, finishing in 39th.
Thank God we didn't see the UFOs trailing around the track throughout a vast majority of this race, but we saw some great racing instead of the UFO abductions, which you always love to see. And I think we'll bring in some drivers here to have a quick little chat before we wrap things up. I'm looking through here. I'm really split on who to chat to. Charles, would you like to have a chat with some of these drivers?
Well, you know, I always lean to the Masters guys because, you know, that's my age group. So if I'm going to pick, I'm going to pick Antonio Race, the winner of the Masters class. Antonio, so very interesting way to win the Masters class. It was a really good battle during the race, and I'm trying to remember, you were battling hard with somebody, and it just, for whatever reason, that name escaped me. But talk about your race today.
Hello, good night. Good to see you again. Since a while, I didn't see you. So,
It has
but
been a minute.
yeah, yeah. Manny have a problem with the refuel, the program. So he use a program that usually refuel his car, and he fails to him, and that's why I got the win. But yeah, the race was interesting. I was enjoying all the time. I was not battling too much. I was just trying to, not ruin my race, not ruin other guys' race. Try not to overtake, to stay behind. So, well, yeah, that was my story on the race, basically.
Yeah, so we always talk about this with these cars because of the way they draft, and we've got this this really long Andretti straight. So, how much fuel saving were you doing during the course of this race?
I have no idea. I didn't check that numbers, but I finished the race with no fuel on the last corner.
Oh, well, there you go.
That's all I know. Yeah.
Well, then that was pretty well timed then. So
yeah,
Antonio,
yeah,
hey,
that was.
hey, congratulations on your
Thank
class
you.
win, and good to talk to you again. And we hope to talk to you again.
To you as
Yeah,
well.
and we hope to talk to you again later on in the season.
Oh yeah, sure. Okay, guys, take care. Thank you. Bye.
And that was Antonio Reese, who ended up taking the checkered flag, the top of the Masters. We'll bring in another class winner to have a quick little chat with him. That's a Dutchman, Juice Simpkins. We'll bring him in here for a quick little chat. Thank you for joining us here in the commentary booth. It was a pretty nice fight between yourself and Carvalho. Sadly, Carvalho had to come into the pits right towards the end of that, but how was it out there?
Oh, it was really tough. We had a really door-to-door fight, mirror to mirror. It was really, really tough. Borderline fair, if you ask me. But in the end, I'm lucky I could get away with the win here.
I'll tell you, from our perspective in the commentary booth, it was absolutely awesome racing here at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. Talk us through your perspective. Did you enjoy the racing that we had here, or was it a little bit more stressful than we usually see from the series?
Well, the start was really easy. Everybody was taking their time to let the field settle in a bit, and then suddenly there was an incident in the hairpin in the back before the back straight, and that ripped up the field completely. So I lost the connection with the guys up front. I really had to fight with a bit of damage that I got there. That's why I took an early pit stop and could repair my car. And from there on, I came just just in front of Cavallo, and there the race kicked off for me. So you can imagine I'm a bit sweaty now.
Oh, I can imagine. So thankfully, I have 1 week between now and Rudskogen. In 1 week's time, a little bit of a different track compared to what we saw here at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, with some similarities as well. They are kind of similar, with a lot more corners there at Rudskogen in Norway. So how do you fancy your chances there?
Well, it's been a while since I practiced on that track, so give me a week to prepare. I hope I can be up front in Spec 2 again. And fight a nice battle with Mr. Cavallo again.
Well, fingers crossed you get a lot of practice time between now and that race in about a week's time. Juice Skimpkins, thank you for joining us here in the commentary booth. Is there anyone you want to give a thanks to or shout out?
Everybody who makes the league happen, because the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors League is by far the most fun out there. So for everybody who's making this happening, a big thumbs up.
I'll tell you what, as a broadcaster, I completely agree with that notion that this is a fantastic series to be a part of. I'm sure from your perspective as a driver is fantastic as well. Juice Skimpkins, thank you for joining us here in the commentary booth. Sorry I probably killed your pronunciation a lot throughout this broadcast, so we hope to see you next time out at Rudskogen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Goodbye.
That was Juice Simpkins, who finishes this race in P number, ended up outside the top 10 overall, but ends up in the position that mattered, P1 in the S2 category. We have one more driver waiting in the interview waiting area. Charles, would you like to have a chat with Christian Kabanka?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's bring Christian in. P2 overall, P2 in Spec 1. Christian, first half of the race before the pit stop, looked like everybody was content just to kind of run in line and stay in the group. Pit stops happen. Looks like everybody kind of maybe split a bit, but toward the end of the race, everybody was together and it was elbows out.
Yeah, it was crazy because some people were saving fuel, and then there were others like me and Simon that were trying to get through the field, and we kind of didn't know. Well, at least for me, I didn't really know how aggressive I should be, because I didn't want to lose the pack. So it was a lot of strategy involved and a lot of tactical games, I would say, involved in that race.
Yeah, and we see this as there's some tracks that seem like they work really well for kind of fuel strategy, and some don't. And we know there's drivers out there that really don't even worry about fuel strategy. They just go out and they just run as hard as they can go. And then there are others that are really cognizant of making sure they get their mileage right so they can get a good quick pit stop. So you're saying that there was a lot more strategy involved, but you and Mayer both had a really good run up through the field.
Yep, it was a lot of fun. I'm surprised there were a few close calls in terms of battling for position and the gaps between cars, but at least for this race, no incidents from me, which is a good thing.
Yeah, sure.
That wasn't a thing in the past, but yeah, I had a really fun race, and I really enjoy this track in this car.
Yeah, it's for me, it's just a broadcast. I love it when this shows up on the calendar because it's going to be lots of passing and lots of tight racing. Is there anybody you want to thank today?
Actually, I kind of just want to thank you guys, because I really do rewind and watch these broadcasts, and I really admire the hard work that you guys do to give us this broadcast week in and week out. And I know that sometimes we are a little chaotic, so yeah. So thanks for the hard work.
Hey, no, this is for me. This is a perfect way to end the week, to sit here and watch some really good racers racing on the track. These Spec Racer 4s, they just seem like they're just a blast to drive, and I enjoy it every week. So thank you as well for putting on a good show week in and week out, along with the rest of the guys out on the track.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see you next time. Congratulations.
That was Christian Kabanka. And very, very kind words, it must be said. This is actually a good little story to wrap up this broadcast before we officially wrap things up here from the Weekend Warriors here on this Sunday. I was actually at a birthday party last Sunday before the Weekend Warriors broadcast, and I had a family member come up to me talking about some of the broadcasts I've done, because obviously my dad, being a proud father, just wants to spread around the word like the plague. And I think it was my brother Kevin describes the broadcast I do. He compared my performances on the air as like being a mega church pastor. In fact, he usually thinks I'm speaking in tongues. But anyways, I think before that, we may want to focus on Rennsport in 1 week's time. That, I think, is going to be a pretty good race, and somewhat similar, I think, in terms of the way that track is compared to Canadian Tire. So we asked the drivers that we had a chat with. I'll ask you this here, Charles. What do you think Rennsport is going to be like in a week's time?
Yeah, it is. It is similar to CTMP. I think it's a little bit longer, but there's some very good fast sections, and there's some very, very technical, tight cornering areas as well. So it's always a challenge, and these guys always come out week in and week out and just give us a spectacular performance. So I'm looking forward to I think this is our first doubleheader at the same track this year, maybe.
I think it may have actually been Summit Point earlier.
Oh yeah,
on this
you're right.
season,
Yeah,
sadly.
you're right. Summit Point. So this will be the second one.
Sadly, I wasn't a part of that, so I will be part of this doubleheader that we have coming up in a week's time, and that is going to be pretty good. I have 3 Actually, no, Charles, we're part of the same 3 broadcasts that day, so a lot of stuff going on here on Apex Racing TV. So the viewers watching the stream, hit the subscribe button, the notification bell as well, so you never miss a thing here from Apex Racing TV. You certainly don't want to miss the Weekend Warriors series because it's always badass racing, week in and week out, and this race was no different. So I think that'll just about do it here for the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors broadcast here at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. So for myself, Ron Mullins, Charles Bichelle joining me in the commentary booth, and our friend Samuli Como doing a fantastic job working on all the cameras in the virtual production hauler, I say thank you all so very much for watching. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you all next time for Super Sunday.